Eduardo asked you, he said, tell the old man to talk about GTO number 3589.
Oh, boy, Eduardo, that is a story that warms my heart, and it probably is one of those ones where I'm going to have to do the real short story. But there was a guy that had a company called Motor Cars Masculine up in North Royalton, Ohio. And when I was a kid, I saw an ad in the Plain Dealer, the Cleveland newspaper, that said you could rent a Ferrari 275 GTB, a 250 GTO, a 300 SL Gullwing, a De Tomaso Mangusta, Maserati 3500 GT, and a host of other cars for like anywhere from $13 to $30 a day. And this was Motor Cars Masculine.
I hate the world that I live in.
So the thing is, this dude bought all these cars because he loved them. And he lived kind of like on a farm, and he had a big barn and everything, and he stored all these cars in the barn. But he left the GTO out on a trailer. I mean, literally for probably 20 or 30 years. And this car had been driven by Innes, Ireland, and it was at the Bahama Speed Weeks. I mean, the car is a very famous car. It didn't win Le Mans or anything like that, but it was raced extensively and very successful and raced by some really great period drivers. And the dude left the car out on the trailer. So we were doing a road rally with a bunch of friends, and we had lunch up by a national park in Cleveland, up near where they were, and I had my 275 GTS, and my wife and I and our friend John. I said, well, shit, we're right by Joe Cortan's place. Why don't we go check out the GTO? Well, we had heard all the stories. The dude comes to the door with a shotgun and was like just, he scared the shit out of everybody because he didn't want anyone to come around. Well, the long story short is, I said, well, the hell with it. And so we're driving up. My wife's sitting there on the center console, and Uncle John's bent over because he thinks that he's going to be aiming for him or something like that. I go, John, you're such a wuss. Anyways, I get out of the car. I go up to the door and knock on the door. I said, may I speak to Mr. Cortan? And so when he came to the door, he said, what do you want? I said, Mr. Cortan, my name's David Nelson. I'm just really curious about one thing. And he goes, oh, you want to talk about the GTO? I go, no. I said, aren't you the guy that started Motor Cars Masculine about 20 years ago? And he goes, or 10 years ago? He goes, yeah. And all of a sudden he got a big smile on his face. And all of a sudden we were good friends. And I said, listen, I hate to bother you on a Sunday or Saturday, whatever it was. He goes, well, listen, you can come see me anytime. Here's my phone number. You call me and we'll get together. We spent the next 2 years getting together. And, and admittedly, I was trying to buy the car. And at the very end of the day, to make a real long story short, we're sitting at Chi-Chi's at Rockside Drive. And he'd call me, and I had a son that was 4 years old and one that was just born. He was a year old. And I'm sitting up there with Joe, and he goes, and we're in the booth in the back, in the corner in the dark, in the whole bed, and he goes, David, do you think I'm crazy? And I said, Joe, no, I don't think you're crazy, but I'll tell you what, the rest of the world does. Why the hell would you leave that GTO sitting on a trailer for 20 years? And the only reason I can say this now on this podcast, Doug, is because my dear friend Joe Cortan died about 5 or 6 years ago. But the short story is this. Joe said to me, David, everyone thinks I'm crazy because of that damn car. And he said, and I'll tell you what, there was a snowstorm about 15 years ago, and my little son went out of the house, and he went to look at the cars in the barn, and he fell in the window well that was full of snow and broke his neck, suffocated and died. And he said, I have never, ever been able to forgive myself because if I didn't have these damn cars, my son would still be alive. And I say this with a very humble heart because it's absolutely true. And I said, well, Joe, listen, what did your son think? And he goes, he always wanted to go to Notre Dame. And I said, well, Joe, tell you what, let's work out a deal. You sell the car, we'll give an annuity to Notre Dame, you make a memorial for your son, and to this day, that's there. Fast forward 6 or 8 years, I'm at the car show at Stan Hewitt with the old 212. This kid comes up to me, throws his arms around me, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And he looks at me and he goes, David, you don't remember me, do you? And I go, no. And he goes, I'm Joe Cortan's son. He said, I just wanted to thank you for helping my dad. He got rid of his demons because he blamed himself for my little brother's death. And him and his wife, my mom, have been traveling the world ever since then, and he got his life back thanks to you. And you know what, all of a sudden, as far as I was concerned, that meant a hell of a lot more to me than a GTO or all the money in the world. And that's the short story. Sad but true.
I don't know how to transition from that.
Well, and look, I'm
not
sorry,
gonna try.
but this all transpired over 2.5 years, so
that's-
I did it in 10 minutes or whatever, you know, but it was very touching for me as well, and it still is today.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Well, God bless Joe, and God bless his son.
Yeah. Cheers to that.